We're afraid to die, yet want something to live for. That was the unofficial lesson I learned growing up in a Christian household. Our prayers always centered around asking God for a long, meaningful, yet safe life, one that ended with us entering heaven. And of course, we gave thanks for having food to eat and shelter, and we'd always pray to God to bless those who were living with a lot less. But when I told them I was coming here to Africa to do a little bit more than just pray for those in need, they begged me not to go. They couldn't understand why I was coming to a place where they believed I was putting myself in unnecessary danger and discomfort. A place where they believed I could get kidnapped or killed because of the desperate situation of poor people living in this region. I'm not naive enough to think that poverty doesn't sometimes bring out the worst in us. But honestly, so does wealth and privilege. And so that conversation with my family was confirmation that I had to give this speech. Lately, I've been obsessing over human nature, the ways we think about others, and how we decide when and how to help anyone else. And there's a vital message that we each need to reflect on if we truly want to see the world become a better place. It's a message about people in comfortable positions and places learning how to get uncomfortable. Whether or not people realize it, most people talk about changing the world in ways that benefit them. They talk about leaving behind a legacy of success and prosperity so that when they die, people will throw huge celebrations in honor of their lives, and then they'll be rewarded with a life of eternity in heaven. There's nothing inherently wrong with any of these actions, except when we don't reflect on how our thoughts and actions keep people in a perpetual state of needing us to be their heroes, requiring us to save them rather than being able and empowered to save themselves. The road to doing good, as we like to say, is paved with good intentions. But we're 20 years into this journey of doing good works in the name of Sustainable Development Goals and still haven't reached our destination. 20 years into the 21st century, nearly 75% of people living in extreme poverty today are in sub-Saharan Africa, even though the percent of people living in the world with poverty entirely moved down from 30 to 10%. These statistics hurt me because of what I still hear people say about my home country, Nigeria, and what people say in general about people from the Black diaspora. Africa, as recently as last year, by some of the world's most prominent leaders on the most visible stages, has been referred to as a dark continent full of wayward people and shithole countries. Many of the approaches that we take today to address the issues going on in Africa come from a scarcity mindset, describing people in undeveloped or underdeveloped nations as being unable to figure it out. As if our ancestors in past centuries weren't leading rich kingdoms that ran pretty well before being interrupted by colonialism. Scarcity mindset shows up in the simple things, like when we think we can throw a couple of dollars in an offering plate, and poof, the money will magically turn into fairy dust and travel all the way to Africa to end world hunger. But we should ask ourselves, in a world where we seem to have enough disposable income to spend money on building robots that look and talk like humans, why do we still not have enough money to make sure real humans do not have to experience poverty and insecurity? And in a world where almost anybody with a computer can make up their own currency, why don't we have enough money to stop 440 million people from going hungry every day? If you ask me, I'd say it has a lot more to do with how we think about saving the world than it does to do with the resources we have to actually change something. We, the privileged, the rich 1%, the middle-class families sitting in our living rooms sending $10 a day to children's charities, and the African diaspora, lucky enough, quote unquote, to be born or living outside of Africa, need to admit that we have a savior complex. And it's turning our beautiful dreams about changing the world into nightmares for others. This nightmare started with this man, Andrew Carnegie, considered the father of modern philanthropy. He literally wrote the book on the savior complex called The Gospel of Wealth, creating this mindset that it's better for us to have a few people, for example, 1% of the world's population, making lots of money. Because by becoming rich, these people prove that they're the only ones we can trust with this responsibility to save people. People like Carnegie, who are part of the rich 1%, want to be honored as superheroes and saints, either with their names plastered on every project or rewarded, again, with an eternity of life in heaven. Carnegie gave money to remarkable initiatives, and many people still do that today. Yes, the millions of dollars that people spend annually on charity is making some kind of impact on changing the world and making it a better place. The harsh truth is that the growing gap between the wealthy and the rest is the main cause of the harm that the wealthy are trying to resolve through their charity in the first place. This is data from a 2018 Harvard University report, and the picture is pretty clear and bleak. Over the past 20 years, the world has 4 times more millionaires and billionaires. And even as they give their money away, there are still parts of the world where you're more likely to become poor rather than become rich or never experience poverty in the first place. Africa is where this happens the most. And what about the charities that we, ordinary individuals, donate our money to? How far does that go in stopping this from happening? Not far enough. It cost around $6 million this year to run one of the world's most well-known charities for children. That's double the amount it cost them to do this work 11 years ago. Yet the rate at which the poorest children around the world enroll in school hasn't changed that much over those past 11 years. In essence, it's costing us more to do the things that we told rich people that we could do with their money that we're actually not doing. In 2013, Peter Buffett, the son of one of the richest men on earth, described this as the Charitable-industrial complex. The CIC claims that poverty is big business and that rich people only donate to charity in a way that keeps them comfortably rich while keeping poor people poor. Poverty is very big business for people and corporations getting tax breaks and positive publicity for free simply by donating relatively small amounts of their wealth. Based on the Charitable-industrial complex and this graph, the term not-for-profit organization is not that accurate. I started thinking about this during my master's degree program 10 years ago, living in London and wondering what I was going to do with my privileged life. For my thesis, I decided to tell a different story, one not about the rich coming to save the poor in Africa. My argument was that if we truly wanted to see Africa develop, we couldn't just sit in ivory towers, conference rooms, or fancy cafes talking about what we wanted to see change, or just throwing money at the problem. We needed to adopt the relentless guerrilla mindset of the people who fight every day for change in their communities while living on less than $1 a day. Mohammed was one of them. Mohammed probably knew he was just one of a million other stories of young people trying to check every box they were told to if they wanted a better life. Study hard, choose the right subjects at university. Thinking all of this would make them the next self-made millionaire, or at least get them a well-paying job that helped them take care of their families. Instead, people like Mohammed would graduate into a life of barely making enough to survive. Instead, they would scramble for jobs given by the types of people who would donate to charity because they're trying to help people like Mohammed. Ironically, some of those people would opt to pay people like Mohammed poverty wages. While these people write songs about Africa and run fundraisers to support the so-called helpless Africans, Mohammed took matters into his own hands, taking a different approach and making a much bigger statement. He set himself on fire. This was probably the hardest decision he had to make, but I'm sure it was completely selfless. More selfless than sending $10 a month from your decent paycheck. Because if Muhammad simply wanted to end his life, he could have done it in the shadows, quietly. Instead, he lit a match where the entire world could see. One that would force us to spark a more honest, deeper conversation about all the other Mohammeds in Africa. Now, I'm not telling everyone to leave here today and set yourself ablaze in order to make a statement. But what I am saying is that there's so many of you in Africa, young and old, maybe in this room, living with little, fighting to free yourselves and the world from the evil of extreme poverty and oppression. I also know that many of you today have way more realistic goals and dreams than others on how to change your community, but you're afraid that you don't have the resources or tools to carry them out. I hope that the stories that I tell you today encourage you and convince you that you're underestimating how much more you can do than many to make the world a much better, safer place. The title of my talk is How to Change the World on Less than $1 a Day, but it requires a little bit more context. I'm not naive enough to think that we don't need some amount of money to make sure that we make the changes we want to see. But there's something in the way that charities and people operate that makes us waste a lot of time and money. And if we got rid of this thing, it would make the money and time that we put into making a difference in the world and ending poverty go a lot further. That thing is entitlement. I was living in Nairobi, Kenya for 4 months, and it absolutely blew my mind seeing this right in front of my eyes. On the one hand, you see places like this where sidewalks and paved roads are non-existent, in an area where over 2 million Kenyans live. On the other, you miraculously see meters of smooth paved roads and, surprise, surprise, sidewalks in an area called the UN Crescent, an area of Nairobi where diplomats and wealthy expatriates live. I would call it a coincidence, maybe, if I didn't see the same thing comparing areas of mainland Lagos to Lagos Island in Nigeria. So for me, it has to be more than a coincidence. It's a clear sign that for many of us, we want to change the world only when it's comfortable and convenient for us. We somehow find a way to build better roads and better houses for ourselves, even while living in the countries where we're coming to help those who don't have it, even when they're the ones who need them the most. Carnegie got one thing right. He told us that heaven on earth only comes when people start to get their happiness, not from working for themselves, but for others. And he was also right when he said that this requires us to change our mindsets, and that the work takes time because, unfortunately, human nature can sometimes default to selfishness. The cheapest, most effective way to change the world is to stop thinking that we're angels and superheroes, and to be brave enough to go into the places and situations that aren't so pretty, to fight against systems that keep the poor poorer and the rich richer. And we need to look at the courage and the sacrifices made by people we're claiming to save, the ones that give up something more precious than money to bring us closer to heaven on earth. Last year, during the year of the return, I saw many of us in the diaspora searching for a heritage we felt detached from. We were searching for purpose and wondering what influence we could have on the people and places we left behind in order to achieve our professional and financial goals. We, the diaspora, are in an entitled situation where we can travel to Accra for celebrity parties, but fly back to the US once we've had our fun, or realize that it's too risky to dedicate our lives fully to living in and making a difference in Africa. Even if we don't decide to move to Africa, to roll up our sleeves and do the work to change lives, we at least need to admit that there are other Africans with less money, but a lot less fear than us, who deserve a seat at those elite tables to speak on the work that they're doing to save and change lives. Think about women like Aisha Yesufu, who without cameras or famous people around her, put her life on the line for years to end this abuse against women, while the rest of the world paid little attention. We barely hear about stories like hers, even when the world became obsessed with finding and reporting on the missing Chibok girls kidnapped in northern Nigeria. As we saw with Aisha in Nigeria and Muhammad during the Arab Spring, those living on less than $1 a day have brought down evil dictators and stopped atrocities without it costing them a thing financially. But without our help from those of us in the middle or the higher echelons of wealth, it can cost them a little bit more, their lives. Those of us in the middle, in the diaspora, need to get uncomfortable. And one way is by demanding that we bring more people who look like Muhammad and Aisha to these conferences that we attend to share their stories and their solutions for effective social change. We should demand that more donations go to grassroots organizations led by people like Aisha, those who have been sacrificing their lives on the ground in Africa, doing more than the international charities that spend billions of dollars every year just on operational cost. By 2050, the largest percent of young people, children, born into poverty will be born in sub-Saharan Africa. And those children will be told the same thing that we told children like Muhammad and me, that if you pray every day, get good grades in school, and prove yourself worthy, you could definitely escape a life of poverty. We would be telling them a very expensive lie. The truth, the real solution, is not comfortable. When we start taking risks and say or do things that are uncomfortable, powerful people will get angry. Maybe only angry enough to make our lives and jobs a living hell. Or maybe they'll get mad enough to go to the extreme, where we're locked up, attacked, and even killed for challenging the status quo. But maybe when we're all in and we put all of our chips on the table, financially, physically, intellectually, and emotionally, we'll actually reach that utopian, pie in the sky goal of saving the world a lot sooner than we think. Thank you.